I think one of the greatest opportunities that we have at Youthline is the opportunity to think outside really the established constructs while operating within the legal guardrails that we as a nonprofit organization have. So it was great to be able to take a step back and be able to, envision what opportunities really could be into the future, and thinking about some of the problems as well that we can tackle moving forward.
The ability to strip back and explore the reason for existence and truly understanding the change that an organization is seeking to have, and then how governance fits into that in alignment with what is currently legislated as fiduciary responsibilities. But again, there's a lot to be said about how you achieve this. And it doesn't have to look the way it always has. I start with the piece around values alignment, which is critical. It's not a nice to have, it's a core competency required. So that's the first thing, because that really does start to get into liability and accountability. And then accountability specifically, I think about, values aligned mechanisms for boards to assess, the experience of governance, the outcomes that they set out for themselves, and ultimately their impact as part of that ecosystem. So again, back to the opportunity that is reimagining governance.
99% of the stuff that boards and executives do around corporate governance or organizational governance is optional, but we treat it like it's sacred. There are laws and regulations that we need to abide by, and we should do that. Why does a boardroom look like a boardroom? And all of them look like that. Why? The answer is, I'm sure, lost to history, right? There's no reasonable explanation for why every single boardroom, or virtually every single boardroom, is a circle or an oval or a square or a horseshoe with a thing at one end where someone makes a presentation. It is absolutely not optimized for creating good conditions for decision making, yet every boardroom still looks like that. Why? It's because that's the way boardrooms look. So this is an example of, if we want to aim ourselves toward innovation around governance, we have to acknowledge the fact that most of what we do is optional. And it's possible, maybe even likely, that most of that optional stuff is working at cross purposes to good governance.
What are we mandated as a board to do? What are some of those legal checks and balances? And then what is everything else that we can do? And the framing of it, especially as we talked about as the playground of governance, really helped kind of shift my mindset of governance from just like this boring old process that we have to go through. We have to hit all these milestones. We have to do this, but that it can be like a really creative, generative experience that really does actually deliver impact and does deliver results, as opposed to just, well, we have to do this because that's what we're supposed to do as a board. So I think that was a really good insight and really helped kind of shift, or I think already some of our thinking, even as we move some decision making of, okay, what is the best way to do this? And also, we're not stuck in these models. We're not stuck in this decision that we've already made. We do have that flexibility to be iterative in our processes. And I think that was a really good insight for us.
And really understanding, we did have some detailed discussions about really what must the board do? And I found that to be very interesting, to really break it down into what really needs to happen around that boardroom table with kind of exclusive language. Like they're hard, right? It's hard to break into that process of the current way that most boards are run, and even the language that's used, and the timing and the commitment that's involved. So the thought that we could break it up into bits and it could be more accessible and more meaningful and done at the right levels, that was quite interesting to me.
Before this process, I tended to think of governance as in the sort of narrow legalistic sense as required by, federal legislation. And while that's still important, There's a whole range of governance that's important, and figuring out where each of our stakeholders fits along that continuum was very helpful for me.
So if we take a step back, and if we do like that idea that good governance is deliberately, intentionally, actively creating effective conditions for decision making, then we've got a new lens to ask, okay, well, what parts of our agenda, of our presentations, of our room layout, of the composition of the room or the board, whatever it is, what parts of those are helping us to make excellent decisions, and what parts maybe aren't helping, and what questions could we ask about those things that might help us to look at it a little bit different. So innovation is possible literally everywhere, from the way that we talk to each other, the way we ask questions, the way we consume and create information, the layout of the room, everything.